let's take the tension texture a little bit further. And what I want you to do is open up the hand 1 file from the scenes that came with the course. And let's turn off our texture locators. All right, so what you're going to see here is a hand. It's a hand that's available with Modo. And what I've done is gone ahead and put a bone structure in there. And what that means is I've placed this inside there. And I'm going to show you how to do that a little bit later in the course. And what that allows us to do is actually take, let's say, a finger and rotate it. Okay, so it's a little bit different than the bend deformer we used in the previous video, just because, well, that bent the whole thing. Now we want specific areas to bend. So just another type of deformer. So I'll show you how that works. But I want to take this a little bit further with the tension texture. I can't do as much as I originally planned because I realized some of the things aren't hooked in yet that I wanted to do, which is sculpt in some wrinkles. So we're going to do it a little bit different way. All right, so let's go over to the render tab. Now, this hand takes a really long time to render sometimes on this computer. So bear with me here. What we're going to do is open up the shader tree. And I want to create some wrinkles on there. So from the Add Layer dropdown, let's go to Textures, then choose Wood. And it might seem a little odd, but let's go over here to the Texture Locator. Change the projection axis to Y. And then for the size of this, bring it down on the X. All right, and so we'll get these nice little lines all the way around. So that looks pretty good. And what I want to do is actually make the knuckles wrinkled. I'm going to just use these for wrinkles in the knuckle. So I'm going to change this. I'm going to right click on this and make it a displacement. It looks a little crazy, right? Well, the default value here, if you go to Material, is set to 20 millimeters. Well, we need this more about 5 millimeters. Okay, so that's the base displacement map, displacement distance that feeds up. And that might seem like a little bit too much right now, but let's just leave it for the time being. All right, now the next thing I need to do is concentrate my displacement into that area. All right, and the way I'm going to do that is with a vertex map. So let me turn that off for the minute, and let's go over here to Paint. All right, so in the Paint tab, we haven't talked about Paint just yet. We're going to take a step into that. We've got our wireframe view here like this. We're going to go to Polygons, and we're going to right mouse around this whole area where we want those wrinkles. And the reason I chose wireframe is so that we could select all the way through. Now we don't really need them underneath, but it's good to do just the same. And then we're going to go to New Weight Map, and we'll call this Finger Bend. It doesn't matter what you call it. And you'll see that turn red. And then we can click to deselect. Okay, so we've just told those vertices that they have a weight map. What does that mean? Well, if we come back over here to render, and let's click that on. What I want to do now is add that weight map texture to the displacement. We're going to go to Add Layer. We'll go down to Processing, Weight Map Texture. Add that in, and it automatically sees that default weight map called Finger Bend. See, it's right there. Now, if we had more, you would just click and select it from the list. And notice that we're getting a highlighted area there because this is set to diffuse color. Well, you can change that to anything you want, but the best way is just to take this, click, and drag it on top of the wood. And that instantly masks out that displacement to that area. So you could think of some of the possibilities of this would be really, really powerful in different areas. But for us right now, that's going to work just fine. So I'm going to save this as, just a temp because I don't want to save over the original. All right, so we've got our isolated displacement map. Now what I need to do is when this finger bends, I need this to be smooth. I need those wrinkles to smooth out. So it needs to be wrinkled down, and then when it bends, smooth out. So we're going to do that with a tension texture, just like we did earlier on the tube. So we'll come down to Processing, Tension Texture. And let's drop that in. See, I told you it takes a little time to catch up. All right. Now right now it's set to diffuse color. We're going to right click on this and make this a group mask. And then we're going to middle click on the value. And we're going to set this key value here down to black. So we go from white to black. Earlier we went this way, like that, but we want the wrinkles to actually be first, and then when the tension happens, they go away. All right, so that's our first setup. Now what we need to do is set a keyframe for the bones. So come here to 3D view, items, take that first bone. All right, so here it is at 0. And then if we come up here to 30, we'll see it bent. Give this a second to update. Now, this can be really taxing on the system, so sometimes I have to shake my render. Now you can see two things. The large displacement has gone away. We've got just a little bit here concentrated to that area. And we could turn down the displacement value just a little bit, so we get just a little less in there when that finger bends. But that tension then smooths it out. So opposite of what we did on the tube in the previous video, where that tension actually makes the displacement grow, this actually pulls the displacement away. But it's all white because we have that tension texture right on top of the base material. So what I want to do is create a new group, and that group will handle our tension and our displacement on its own. And we'll select this here, drop that in there. Okay, so there's our group mask. Now I can add another tension texture so that a color appears on here, just like the two, but by putting it in this group, that goes away. Now let me jump back here to frame 0 where our finger is up. It's quite a lot of calculation. And we'll go down here to our group mask. Now, in the previous tutorial, the value was this way, so that we've got tension happening on the back end, whereas this time we're actually reversing it. And let me just do a render that'll come out a little bit faster. Now, this is exaggerated, of course, for this example. But then we can tone down that displacement. We can actually go back to the weight map texture, paint it down a little bit, and soften the edges, have less value, and bring that weight value down so that's not quite as heavy. But here you can see we've got this very nice scabbed, crazy kind of bark-like texture on there when the finger comes up. So the last thing I would do then is come in here, and you can even come to the weight map texture and apply less of that so you get a little more wrinkle within the hand. Or we can come to the displacement value, and we can bring that down so we don't have as much. And at the same time, we can play with the ring values. So simply too, you can come back down here to material, and you can also bring this much lower. So if we have 3 millimeters, let's go 0.5 millimeters. So 500 UM, and hopefully the sync can redraw. You can also keyframe the displacement distance. So over time, you've got a very slight kind of wrinkle here, but then when the finger bends, you can actually ramp up that displacement distance just so you get a little bit more definition and use a variation of those two. Now, I was going to get into the schematic a little bit more with a driven channel, only to find out that we don't have that hooked in yet from the sculpting. So we're going to keep it like this. We are going to get in the schematic just a little bit later. Let's take a look at this final render. There we go. Okay, so a little bit less displacement. You got some nice wrinkles on there when the finger's open, and then when it bends, it becomes a little bit smoother. So there you go. So a little bit displacement. Ignore this render right here. You can load up hand 002, which will have this example. And let's move on to a little bit more fun stuff with Mesh Fusion.